The crisp morning air filled Sergeant Mark Stevens' lungs as he continued his routine patrol through the dense mountain forest. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows through the towering pine trees. His boots crunched softly against the forest floor, covered in fallen leaves and morning frost. This remote area of the military base bordered a vast wilderness, making it a crucial part of the perimeter security routine. The forest seemed different today. Mark had walked this path hundreds of times during his 3 years stationed at this base, but something felt off. The familiar scent of pine and earth mixed with an unfamiliar tension in the air. He adjusted his backpack, which contained his standard patrol gear and emergency supplies, as his trained eyes scanned the surroundings. 20 minutes into his patrol, Mark noticed the first sign that something was wrong. The usual morning chorus of birds was missing. The forest, typically alive with chirping and rustling, had fallen into an unnatural silence. Years of military training had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, every sense was telling him to stay alert. As he moved deeper into the forest, the signs became more obvious. Fresh tracks marked the ground, unlike anything he normally saw in this area. Large portions of mud had been disturbed, suggesting heavy activity during the night. Broken branches littered the path, some still showing fresh breaks with sap slowly oozing out. These weren't the marks of regular wildlife movement. They looked more deliberate, more human. Mark slowed his pace, carefully documenting the location on his GPS unit. The morning mist still hung low among the trees, reducing visibility and adding to the eerie atmosphere. He noticed more unusual signs: a piece of rope caught on a low branch, empty food wrappers partially buried under leaves, looking relatively new. The silence grew heavier as he ventured further from the main patrol route. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, creating an unsettling stillness. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as he spotted something that made him pause: a clear trail of large paw prints in the mud, alongside what appeared to be boot prints. But these weren't regular tracks. They showed signs of struggle, deep gouges in the earth, suggesting something heavy being dragged. His military training kicked in as he methodically surveyed the area. The signs pointed to recent activity, perhaps within the last day or two. The boot prints suggested at least 3 different people had passed through, their tracks overlapping in a chaotic pattern. But it was the large animal tracks that concerned him most. They were unlike anything he had encountered during his patrols. The morning light strengthened, filtering through the canopy above, but it seemed to cast more shadows than it dispelled. Mark checked his radio, ensuring he maintained contact with base command. The atmosphere grew more oppressive with each step, the silence more pronounced. Years of military service had taught him to read these signs. Something significant had disturbed the natural order of this forest. As he followed the trail of disturbance, the signs of human activity increased. More broken branches, disturbed undergrowth, and what looked like tire tracks partially hidden by fallen leaves. His pace slowed further as the track led him toward a denser part of the forest, an area rarely included in regular patrols due to its rough terrain. The morning fog began to lift, but the silence remained. Mark stopped to take a drink from his water bottle, his senses remaining alert to his surroundings. The wildlife should have returned to their normal activities by now, but the forest remained unnaturally quiet. Something or someone had scared them away, and whatever it was serious enough to keep them away. As Mark ventured deeper into the unfamiliar section of the forest, a sound caught his attention. It wasn't the normal rustling of leaves or the scurrying of small animals. This was different, a low, mournful sound that seemed to echo through the trees. The noise was unlike anything he had heard in his years of forest patrols, a mix between a whimper and a heavy breath. Following the sound, he moved cautiously through the thick undergrowth. The morning fog had started to thin, but dark clouds gathered overhead, threatening rain. The air grew heavier, matching the growing tension in his chest. The strange sound grew louder, guiding him toward what appeared to be a small clearing ahead. Mark stopped abruptly at the edge of the clearing, his breath catching in his throat. There in the center, tied to a massive oak tree, was an adult brown bear. The sight was so unexpected, so wrong, that for a moment he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. But as he blinked and looked again, the reality of the scene became clear. and his stomach turned with a mix of shock and anger. The bear was secured to the tree with heavy chains and ropes, wrapped multiple times around its body and the trunk. Despite its massive size and strength, the animal wasn't thrashing or showing any signs of aggression. Instead, it lay partly on its side, its huge head resting on the ground. The bear's eyes, deep brown and surprisingly alert, fixed on Mark with what seemed like a mix of wariness and exhaustion. Rain began to fall softly through the canopy, adding to the grim atmosphere. Mark conducted a careful visual assessment of the situation, noting every detail with his trained eye. The bear's fur was matted and dirty, showing signs of long-term captivity. Around its neck, a thick metal collar had worn away the fur, leaving raw skin underneath. The ground around the tree was torn up, suggesting the bear had initially fought against its restraints, but had now given up. What struck Mark most was the bear's behavior. Despite being a wild animal in a distressing situation, it showed no signs of aggression as he carefully moved closer. Instead, it watched him with what appeared to be a resigned awareness. The rain increased steadily, but the bear barely seemed to notice, maintaining its steady gaze on the soldier. The whole scene felt surreal in the gloomy morning light. Water dripped from the leaves above, creating a gentle percussion that contrasted sharply with the gravity of the situation. Mark noticed other disturbing details: empty food containers scattered nearby, suggesting someone had been feeding the bear regularly. This wasn't a random act, but something carefully planned and maintained. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Mark conducted a wider survey of the immediate area. The bear's breathing was labored but steady, its massive chest rising and falling in a rhythm that seemed almost hypnotic. Despite its predicament, there was a dignity in the way it held itself, something that spoke of intelligence and resilience rather than just wild instinct. The rain continued to intensify, but Mark barely noticed it soaking through his uniform. His focus remained on the bear and the growing mystery of its situation. Questions raced through his mind, each more disturbing than the last. Who would do this? Why here, so close to a military base? How long had this magnificent creature been suffering here, hidden just out of sight of regular patrols? As another roll of thunder echoed through the forest, the bear lifted its head slightly, looking past Mark into the forest beyond. This simple movement revealed more details about its condition, patches of scarred skin visible through its wet fur, telling a story of prolonged abuse and neglect. The soldier felt a deep connection to the animal's suffering, recognizing in its eyes something he had seen before in rescued service animals, a mix of trauma and resilience that spoke directly to his heart. Mark knew he needed to document everything carefully before taking any action. Moving with deliberate slowness to avoid startling the bear, he pulled out his phone to photograph the scene. The rain had lessened to a light drizzle, making it easier to capture clear images of the disturbing situation before him. Upon closer inspection, the bear's condition was worse than he initially thought. Its fur, naturally thick and glossy in healthy bears, was patchy and dull. Large areas were completely bare, especially around the shoulders and neck where the metal collar had rubbed the skin raw. The collar itself was crude and brutal, a heavy piece of industrial metal that looked like it had been welded together around the bear's neck. Rust spots on the metal suggested it had been there for months, perhaps even longer. The chains binding the bear to the tree told their own story of cruelty. They were shipping chains, the kind used to secure heavy cargo, wrapped multiple times around the animal's body and the tree trunk. The links had worn deep grooves into the tree bark, indicating the bear had been here for an extended period. Some of the chains were newer than others, suggesting regular maintenance by whoever was responsible for this atrocity. As Mark observed the bear's physical condition, his military medical training helped him catalog the various injuries and signs of neglect. The animal was severely undernourished, its powerful frame showing signs of muscle loss. Through the matted fur, he could see its ribs protruding slightly, though someone had clearly been providing enough food to keep it alive. Several old wounds had healed poorly, leaving visible scars across its body. The bear's paws showed signs of infection, likely from constantly standing on the wet ground with no ability to move freely. Its claws were overgrown and broken, suggesting it had tried desperately to free itself in the early days of its captivity. Dark stains on the ground around the tree marked where rain had mixed with blood from its injuries over time. Looking more closely at the immediate area, Mark found more evidence of the systematic nature of this operation. Hidden under leaves and debris, he discovered empty food cans and water containers. They were all the same brand, suggesting a regular feeding routine. Some labels were faded and weathered, while others were recent, creating a timeline of the bear's captivity. The ground around the tree told its own story. A circle of bare earth extended outward from the tree, marking the limit of how far the bear could move in any direction. Beyond this, the forest floor was undisturbed, creating a stark boundary between captivity and freedom. Small pieces of the bear's fur were scattered throughout the area, caught on low branches and undergrowth, silent testimony to its struggles. Mark noticed something else that made his blood run cold. Partially hidden beneath fallen leaves, he found small pieces of paper, torn and weathered but still readable. They appeared to be bedding slips, suggesting this location had been used for some kind of illegal wildlife fighting operation. The thought of this magnificent animal being used for entertainment made his jaw clench with anger. The bear watched him throughout his investigation, its eyes following his movements with an unsettling awareness. Despite its obvious suffering, it maintained a remarkable calm, almost as if it understood Mark was different from its captors. Its breathing remained steady but labored, and occasionally it would shift slightly, causing the chains to rattle against each other in a haunting melody of imprisonment. Fresh boot prints in the mud indicated someone had been here recently, probably within the last day. Multiple sets of tracks led away from the tree in different directions, confirming Mark's suspicion that this was an organized operation involving several people. The tracks were partially filled with water from the recent rain, but still clear enough to photograph as evidence. Following the most prominent set of boot prints leading away from the bear, Mark discovered a hidden path through the dense undergrowth. The narrow trail, carefully concealed from casual observation, led him to a small clearing about 200 yards from the restrained bear. What he found there made his heart sink even further. The traffickers' camp was partially hidden under a camouflage tarp, stretched between several trees to protect it from aerial observation. Though recently abandoned, the camp told a story of long-term criminal activity. A metal fire pit contained fresh ashes, suggesting the occupants had left in a hurry, probably alerted by something to clear out quickly. The remnants of their presence painted a disturbing picture of organized wildlife trafficking. Under the tarp, Mark found a weatherproof container filled with documents. His hands trembled slightly as he opened file folders containing photographs and papers. The first photo showed the bear in a much healthier state, performing in what appeared to be a traveling circus. More recent photos documented its decline, including images of the bear being forced to fight other animals. Each photo was dated and labeled with amounts of money, revealing a systematic betting operation. A leather-bound notebook contained detailed records written in several different hands. Lists of dates, locations, and amounts painted a picture of an extensive criminal network. The bear was just one part of a larger operation. Mark found records of other animals, tigers, wolves, and even smaller bears, along with their current locations marked on a folded map. Red X marks on the map likely indicated locations of other captured animals throughout the region. The camp contained other disturbing evidence. Veterinary supplies were scattered about, including strong sedatives and antibiotics, suggesting someone with medical knowledge was involved. Training equipment, similar to what might be found in a circus but modified with cruel additions, lay partially covered by leaves. Heavy chains like those binding the bear were coiled nearby, ready for use on other captured animals. A series of notebooks revealed the operation's scope. Carefully coded entries detailed transportation routes, contact information, and payment records. Some entries were recent, dated just days ago, while others went back several months. The organization behind this clearly had connections across multiple states, possibly even internationally. What troubled Mark most was finding recent photos of other bears, clearly marked for future acquisition. The trafficking ring was actively expanding their operation, scouting new locations and targeting more animals. Among the documents, he found detailed plans for constructing hidden holding areas throughout the forest, including the exact specifications for securing large animals. Further investigation of the camp revealed sophisticated communications equipment, suggesting the operation had lookouts and an early warning system. This explained the fresh signs of hasty departure. They must have spotted his approach during his regular patrol route and evacuated, leaving behind evidence in their rush to escape detection. In a separate waterproof case, Mark found more disturbing documentation. Medical records showed the systematic abuse of the captured bear, including detailed notes about its weight loss and injury recovery times. The records were clinical and detached, treating the magnificent animal as nothing more than inventory. Profit calculations were scribbled in margins, showing how they maximized their returns through minimal care and maximum exploitation. The camp also contained evidence linking this operation to other criminal activities. Hidden among the papers were documents suggesting connections to illegal gambling rings and protected species trafficking. Business cards and contact information, though partially coded, indicated involvement of people from various countries, revealing an international network of wildlife crime. As Mark carefully photographed and documented everything in the camp, the rain picked up again, adding urgency to his investigation. He knew he needed to collect as much evidence as possible before weather conditions deteriorated further and destroyed crucial proof of these crimes. Returning to the bear, Mark approached with renewed purpose. His years of experience with traumatized service animals had taught him the importance of slow, deliberate movements. The rain continued steadily, but the bear remained alert, watching him with those intelligent eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. The sight of the bear brought back memories of his time in service animal rehabilitation. Before his current posting, Mark had worked with military dogs that had experienced trauma in combat zones. Those experiences had taught him that animals, like humans, carry deep emotional scars from abuse and neglect. Looking at the bear now, he recognized the same signs of psychological trauma he had seen in those service dogs. Moving slowly, Mark began speaking in a low, steady voice. He remembered how rescued animals responded to calm, consistent tones. The bear's ears twitched slightly at the sound of his voice, but it showed no signs of aggression. Instead, it lifted its head slightly, revealing more of its face. The gesture, though small, demonstrated a level of trust that touched Mark deeply. As he carefully settled into a sitting position at a safe distance, Mark noticed something remarkable. The bear's eyes tracked his movements with an intelligence that went beyond mere animal instinct. There was recognition there, an understanding that transcended the natural barrier between species. Years of captivity had taught this creature to read human intentions, and somehow it sensed Mark's genuine desire to help. Rain dripped from the leaves above, but neither man nor bear seemed to notice. Mark shared his own story softly, talking about the injured dogs he had helped rehabilitate, the ones that everyone else had given up on. He understood what it meant to be broken and to find the strength to trust again. The bear listened, its breathing becoming more relaxed with each passing minute. A deeper connection began to form as they sat together in the rain. Mark recognized in the bear's resilience something he had seen in his fellow soldiers who had survived traumatic experiences. Despite everything this magnificent creature had endured, cruel treatment, isolation, and abuse, it had maintained its dignity. Its spirit, though wounded, remained unbroken. Time seemed to slow as they studied each other. The bear's massive head tilted slightly, showing curiosity rather than fear. Mark noticed how it would blink slowly when he spoke, a sign he recognized from his work with traumatized animals as one of growing comfort and trust. Despite its massive size and natural power, the bear showed remarkable gentleness in its responses to his presence. Their shared moment was interrupted by distant thunder, but the bear remained calm, drawing strength from Mark's steady presence. He noticed how it would occasionally glance at the chains binding it, then look back at him as if asking for help. The intelligence in these gestures was unmistakable, showing an understanding of its situation and a hope for liberation. Mark thought about his own experiences with trauma and recovery. Like this bear, he had known what it meant to feel trapped, to struggle with circumstances beyond his control. His time in combat had left its own scars, visible and invisible. Perhaps this shared experience of survival created a bridge between them, an unspoken understanding that transcended words. As the morning wore on, the bear began showing more signs of trust. Its body language softened, muscles relaxing slightly despite the discomfort of its bonds. When Mark shifted his position, the bear remained calm, showing none of the tension typical of wild animals in the presence of humans. This was the kind of breakthrough he had seen before with rescued service animals. The crucial moment when trust begins to overcome fear. Mark knew the rescue would require careful planning and proper support. Using his radio, he contacted Base Command, keeping his voice steady as he reported the situation. The response was immediate, a coordinated effort quickly taking shape. Wildlife authorities and a veterinary team were notified, along with local law enforcement to document the crime scene. The rain intensified as they waited, making conditions more challenging. Mark remained with the bear, maintaining the trust they had built. Within an hour, the quiet forest clearing transformed into a hub of focused activity. Wildlife rescue vehicles navigated the difficult terrain, their arrival announced by the crunching of branches and splashing through growing puddles. The veterinary team approached first, led by Dr. Sarah Chen, an expert in large wildlife rescue. Her experienced eyes took in the scene, noting the bear's condition and the complexity of its restraints. The bear tensed at the arrival of newcomers, but Mark's continued presence seemed to keep it calm. The connection they had formed proved crucial for what came next. Thunder rolled overhead as the team prepared for the delicate operation. The first challenge was administering a mild sedative, enough to keep the bear calm but not fully unconscious. Dr. Chen explained they needed the bear aware enough to move on its own once freed, as carrying such a large animal through the difficult terrain would be nearly impossible. The process of removing the restraints proved more challenging than anyone anticipated. The chains had become partially embedded in the tree bark, requiring careful cutting to avoid any sudden movements that might startle the bear. The rain made the metal slick, and the power tools they brought kept cutting out due to water exposure. Mark stayed near the bear's head, speaking softly and maintaining eye contact. Each time the rescue team approached with their tools, the bear would look to him first, as if seeking reassurance. The trust they had built became the foundation of the entire rescue operation. Team members worked in shifts, some holding tarps overhead to keep the worst of the rain off, while others worked on the chains. The metal collar proved particularly difficult to remove. Years of rust and exposure had practically fused it around the bear's neck. Dr. Chen worked meticulously with specialized cutting tools, careful to avoid causing any additional pain or injury. The bear remained surprisingly still during this delicate process, as if understanding the importance of cooperation. As the afternoon wore on, the weather continued to deteriorate. Mud made the ground treacherous, and the team had to constantly adjust their equipment to maintain safe working conditions. Local law enforcement documented everything, taking photographs and collecting evidence for their investigation into the trafficking operation. The breakthrough came after nearly 4 hours of careful work. The last chain fell away with a heavy thud, followed by the final piece of the collar. For the first time in what must have been months, maybe years, the bear was free of its restraints. The moment was charged with emotion, the team holding their breath as they waited to see how the animal would react. The bear remained still for several long moments, as if unsure what to do with its newfound freedom. Then slowly, it rose to its full height, muscles trembling with the effort. Despite its weakened condition, the bear's massive size reminded everyone of its wild nature. Yet there was no aggression in its movements, only a careful testing of its liberty. Dr. Chen and her team quickly set up a path to the transport vehicle, using food to create a trail. The bear would need immediate medical attention, and getting it to move voluntarily was crucial. Mark stepped back slowly, giving the animal space to make its own choices. The bear took tentative steps, seeming to test the ground with each movement, as if remembering how to walk without the weight of chains. The entire team worked together, maintaining a careful balance between guidance and distance. Their coordinated efforts paid off as the bear gradually made its way toward the transport cage. The rain had finally begun to ease, as if nature itself was acknowledging the success of their mission. The journey to the wildlife sanctuary took several hours through the stormy weather. Mark followed the transport vehicle in his own car, unable to simply walk away from the animal he had formed such a unique bond with. The sanctuary, nestled in a protected valley 50 miles away, specialized in rehabilitating rescued wildlife. particularly bears saved from illegal trafficking operations. The initial medical assessment revealed the full extent of the bear's condition. Beyond the visible injuries, X-rays showed old fractures that had healed poorly, telling a story of past abuse. Despite these findings, the sanctuary's veterinary team remained optimistic. The bear's blood work showed no major organ damage, and its calm demeanor suggested a remarkable resilience that would aid in recovery. Mark began visiting the sanctuary every weekend, watching the bear's gradual transformation. The sanctuary staff named the bear Atlas, inspired by its strength and endurance. Within weeks, proper nutrition and care began showing results. Atlas's coat regained its natural shine, and the wounds around his neck started healing, leaving scars that would fade but never completely disappear. The most remarkable changes were behavioral. Atlas showed increasing comfort in his new environment, exploring his spacious enclosure with growing confidence. The sanctuary staff noted how he would perk up during Mark's visits, showing recognition and what appeared to be genuine happiness at seeing his rescuer. The bear that had shown such remarkable trust during its rescue continued to demonstrate an extraordinary capacity for healing and forgiveness. The investigation into the trafficking ring gained momentum, sparked by the evidence Mark had discovered. His detailed documentation led to multiple arrests and the rescue of several other animals held captive in different locations. The case drew national attention, highlighting the issue of wildlife trafficking and leading to increased funding for forest patrols and wildlife protection programs. 3 months into Atlas's recovery, the sanctuary celebrated a significant milestone. The bear that had once been chained to a tree now played in a large pool, showing natural behaviors that had been suppressed during captivity. Mark watched from the observation area as Atlas splashed in the water, hardly believing this was the same animal he had found in such desperate circumstances. The story of Atlas's rescue inspired changes in local wildlife protection policies. The military base where Mark was stationed implemented new protocols for forest patrol routes, focusing on areas previously considered too remote to check regularly. Training programs were developed to help personnel recognize signs of wildlife trafficking, creating a more comprehensive approach to protecting the surrounding wilderness. 6 months after the rescue, Atlas had gained back his healthy weight and strength. Though he would never be able to return to the wild due to his years in captivity, he had found contentment in his sanctuary home. The staff often found him watching the sunrise from his favorite spot on a rocky outcrop, his powerful frame silhouetted against the morning sky, the picture of hard-won peace. Mark's final visit to the sanctuary before his military transfer brought the story full circle. Atlas approached the edge of his enclosure, pressing his nose against the protective barrier and greeting. The fear and resignation once visible in his eyes had been replaced by a calm confidence. In this moment, Mark realized that while the physical chains had been broken months ago, the real healing had been in restoring Atlas's spirit. The legacy of Atlas's rescue extended far beyond one bear's story. It became a testament to the resilience of nature and the difference that compassion could make. The sanctuary now hosted regular educational programs, using Atlas's story to teach visitors about wildlife protection and the importance of preserving natural habitats. His journey from captivity to freedom became a powerful symbol of hope and a reminder of the responsibility humans hold as stewards of the natural world. Subscribe to our story channel for more touching and inspiring stories of animal rescues and human compassion. Every subscription helps us raise awareness about wildlife trafficking and supports animal protection efforts worldwide. Join our community of animal lovers and be part of making a difference.